Hello. It would have been about a week ago I bought these on a second-hand CD trading, what are you going to call it, group, New Zealand Facebook group that I've talked about before. It's kind of one of the main places I buy stuff now because it's a much easier way to buy because generally the prices, it's not like a second-hand charity store where you're getting $1 CDs or 50-cent CDs, but it's cheaper than the actual music stores. And obviously you can pick and choose, and sometimes for months things don't come up, but then sometimes you see really good things you've been looking for ages. These two things here are actually things that you would be able to find if you waited long enough, but I thought they were on sale for $5 each, and I thought, why not? I've owned both of these before, and multiple times actually I've owned. This one I had on cassette when I was a kid. I think from memory my older brother had it on cassette and I inherited it or took it or whatever, so I had it on cassette. And this one I've owned on CD at least twice previously. I remember I had the 5.1 Atmos Dolby mix, and it had a blue cover. It had the prism, but the background was blue, not the iconic black. I also had the original version probably about 24 years ago. So this is probably my third copy. So let's talk a little bit about it. Obviously, Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon. One of the greatest albums of all time. One of my favorite albums of all time. There's not really much you can say about this that hasn't been said a billion times over. This was just, was it last year? It was the 50th anniversary. This was released, I'm pretty sure, in 1973. I'm going to be able to find the actual date on here anywhere. Okay, so you can see this CD itself, the pressing of this was 94. 73, there we go, 73. So yes, last year was the 50th anniversary. It was it was around this time last year. Late last year. Does it say the actual? No, it wouldn't say the day. The music on this album is so, I use this word a lot in other videos, ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's kind of so common and popular and widespread that it's almost part of the cultural fabric of most Western countries, and maybe some even non-Western countries, I don't know. But just growing up, my eldest brother, so my eldest brother's quite a lot older than me. He was of the age, he kind of grew up in the 70s. And so, Pink Floyd was even probably bigger for him than it is for me. And I just remember he played this music. I remember it being played on the radio a lot. It was everywhere. And there's that famous stat or fact or whatever you call it, that this album stayed on the Billboard Hot 100 chart for like over a decade, maybe even longer than that. It just sold continuously. I don't know how many copies it sold by this stage, but God knows. If we just flick through the booklet, and you can see this looks fairly old. It's secondhand, so I don't know how old this is. It's from 94. I don't think he bought it in 94. The guy bought it off, but you can look from the kind of this, because it's all black, the white creasing shows up easier on the spine kind of area. That doesn't bother me at all. Otherwise, the booklet's in actually pretty good condition. There's no water damage, which is quite a common thing I find with secondhand CDs. We have the track listing and the lineup at the time, all lyrics by Roger Waters. There they are at the pyramid, well, not at the pyramids, but with the pyramids in the background. It's amazing how much Nick Mason changed. He looks like he could be a member of Black Sabbath there. But if you see, like, obviously they all changed but I think he changed the most, maybe. Or I guess you could say David Gilmour changed a bit as well. Some people say Roger Waters was quite a, now that sounds stupid and kind of trite, but he was quite an ugly young man, but he grew into quite a handsome older man. I remember seeing it written somewhere that he had quite angular features. Actually looked a little bit like Adam Driver, didn't he? Adam Driver is kind of considered to be very handsome, but anyway. But then as he kind of aged, he kind of became almost looked like Richard Gere in his kind of, as he went grey, and kind of funny how that works. There with the lyrics of the tracks and with this kind of artwork. Now I know that the artist was Storm Thorgerson. Does it say anywhere him? Okay, it doesn't say him, but it also does there. Storm Thorgerson. He did the artwork, and he's done so many other. I think he did most of Pink Floyd's artwork, and he's done other bands as well. For example, the Audio Slave cover, and maybe some other band. Maybe Muse. He did one of the Muses covers. Absolution, perhaps. He was actually friends with the band, I think. I think he went to school with them in Cambridge. I think I've read before. And that Hypnosis, I think, is like an art collective he was part of. I might be a little bit off on that. But they did the photography anyway, in the background and the pyramids and whatnot. And there we have the band with the heartbeat across the rainbow spectrum. Rick Wright also looks vaguely familiar. He looks like someone there. There's the angle. Now Roger Waters is kind of unmistakable. It's got no one's face looks like Roger Waters' face. Recorded at Abbey Road. I was reading, actually I'm going to talk about this soon, I was reading an interview with David Gilmour, and his most recent solo album, Luck and Strange, he was talking about selecting the producer for that. And the guy, I can't remember the name of the guy, he's quite a young guy, he ended up choosing to produce that album. Had previously worked as a kind of like an assistant in Abbey Road, I think. And David Gilmour said that for him, that's like a tick in the box, because I guess he so highly regards Abbey Road and the people who work there. So as for the actual music, like I said, there's not much I could add to the scholarship that has been written and said and debated on this album. I'd say that Time is probably one of my favorite songs ever. I'd say if I was constructing, and as impossible as it would be to do, constructing a top 10 list of my favorite songs, when they do that Desert Island Discs show on BBC Radio, and even though that's choosing 5 or 6 songs, but that's kind of a little bit different. They kind of do that as kind of like different like signposts of your life, the way that they kind of set that up, it seems. But if I was to choose 10 favorite songs, I'd say Time would very likely be on there. It's has everything. I love the intro, the way that it stretches out. I love the tick tock, or whatever that's supposed to be. And I saw something on YouTube a few months ago, the way they achieve that sound. I don't know if this is true, that on Roger Waters' bass, you put your hands, you mute the strings further up the neck, and then you use the pick near the bridge or near the pickups, and kind of like flick it across percussively. And I guess because bass strings are quite thick, it does this even better. It kind of makes a sound. I actually tried it with my guitar, and it actually does. I could see how they could make that sound. And it's got that kind of that rototom drum sound, and the way it kind of builds up. And the lyrics, quite, I don't know, it stuck with me. I think they stuck with everyone, don't they? I've heard lots of people talking. I remember Mick Wall, the famous rock journalist, saying that he was haunted by those lyrics in his 20s because he was terrified he was going to waste his life in some way. And I was thinking about the other day, if you haven't heard that song, which I'm sure you have, but it's basically the idea of don't wait to live your life. Life is now. Get on with it. And if you wait too long, you'll realize that life has passed you by. And I was thinking about the other day, and I was thinking, well, the very fact, like how universal that feeling or that fear is, the fact that he wrote a song about it. And generally, when people write songs about things, they are emotions or fears or feelings or ideas that they're not singular, are they? The reason why music is popular is because people can relate across to other people's ideas or feelings. And the fact that he wrote that song and that it's so popular and so many people talk about those lyrics must mean that it is such a universal fear that people have of wasting their life, but at the same time seemingly being unable to avoid that. No one can go through life and grasp every second and achieve everything they want to do. Everyone's got some procrastination, some time wasting. In some ways, I think that's necessary to the human condition. You can't be going full RPMs the whole time, can you? But I just kind of thought about it in a different way for the first time the other day when I was listening to it. Brain Damage, another song. One of the kind of first songs that I learned to play completely on guitar from beginning to end. I saw Roger Waters, I think it was on the Classic Albums DVD documentary. There was that Classic Album series about 25 years, maybe 30 years ago now. And the ones they did were, it kind of started, I think the first one I ever saw was Paul Simon's Graceland. And it's like an hour documentary where they go into the studio with the artist and usually the producer. They get out the old master tapes, the mixing desk, and listen to the different parts. They describe how they wrote it, why they mixed it, or in a certain way. Very, very interesting. Other famous ones are the Black Album by Metallica, Nirvana, Nevermind, and I think one of the Deep Purple albums, one of the Black Sabbath albums, and Dark Side of the Moon. And on the Dark Side of the Moon one, on the DVD version, there's extras, and one of the extras, like the bonus things, is Roger Waters sitting there being interviewed, and he plays an acoustic version of Brain Damage, and it was really quite beautiful. But obviously a little bit different than the album version, but it kind of always stuck with me, and it kind of inspired me to want to learn it on guitar. It probably took about 10 years from seeing that to being able to achieve it, but I'd say pretty confidently now I can play that that song from beginning to end. Not singing at the same time, that's probably a little bit beyond me. But the album is such a kind of a whole, even though I don't think it is a concept album, or maybe it is, maybe in some ways, but it feels like one. We talk about the death of the album and how the way music is consumed nowadays and all that kind of thing. But there are certain albums that just do feel like themselves. They work so well together. They feel like one piece of music across the whole, however long, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And this one in particular for me feels that way. you can so easily listen to it in one go. It fits together, it flows together so well. It's like a journey. And there's that whole thing about the Wizard of Oz. To be honest, I don't really care, but apparently it does match up quite well. But then whenever you hear, I've seen the odd interview where they've asked Roger Waters or David Gilmour about it, and they both the way they answer it doesn't seem like it is a thing, because they both the way they answer is kind of just like in a very like, what? No, like, if you know what I mean, like not kind of like a wink and a nudge, but more just like, no, not whatsoever. But yeah, anyway. Fast forward, what? How long was this? This was 85-ish? 85? 87, sorry, 87. So fast forward quite a long time. What's that, 14 years. Roger Waters has left the band, I think with the intention of the band ceasing to exist, but David Gilmour and Nick Mason didn't want the band to cease to exist, so they fought for the name in a court case and retained it. And they carried on into the 80s in I used to say different, yet in, again, many ways, it feels like a natural progression in some ways, I guess. I know a lot of people don't like this album. I know a lot of people don't like the post-Waters Pink Floyd. They feel this is kind of too stadium rock, too 80s. But I've always liked it. It's got a different feeling than the other Pink Floyd. You see, the original Pink Floyd has got such a unique and special atmosphere and aura about them, especially those 70s albums. Wish You Were Here, Animals, Dark Side of the Moon. They feel otherworldly, and I can't really put into words how. This isn't a unique thing. Who doesn't? Many millions and millions of people love Pink Floyd. So I'm not saying something like it's unique to me, but sometimes it feels that way. Like it has such a personal, almost like a spiritual effect on you when you listen to some of that music. That it's like from somewhere else. It's not from people. And also the way that they were in the 70s, they weren't like Led Zeppelin with the kind of, Robert Plant out the front and, with the skin tight jeans and the groupies and all that kind of aura that some of the 70s bands had. They were much more what was the word? Depersonalized. Their personalities were not the front and center of the band. They weren't kind of stereotypical rock stars in the way that many 70s rock bands were. And so therefore it felt like the music was kind of beyond that. Anyway, wrapping myself into loops. 14 years from the picture we saw before to this, I'd say it's quite a change. Although in other ways it's not. I guess if he had a moustache and a bit longer hair and didn't have his hands on his chin like that pose is always a little bit I don't know, emasculating? I'm not sure. Mr. Gilmour, well into the way of losing his hair by this stage. By the division bell, it had pretty much all gone, hadn't it? But yeah, I think it's a good album, but a different sound, but it's still a great album. They brought Rick Wright back in to play keyboards and piano, and I do some vocals on this. I'm not, I've read a lot of books about Pink Floyd over the years. 2 or 3 that I remember actually like physically reading. Like I remember sitting on a bus on the way to work one day reading a Pink Floyd book. From my memory, but this was a long time ago, so I'd say in the last 15, maybe 10 years, I haven't read any books about them. From my memory, Roger Waters fired Rick Wright because Rick Wright was having a lot of, I think, alcohol problems maybe, or maybe other substance problems, but also kind of mental issues, like anxiety perhaps, and there he wasn't performing and bringing anything to the band that Roger Waters saw or believed he should be, and so he fired him. But at the same time, would Roger Waters have the power to just fire him? I'm not sure if the other 2 members were part of that firing, but I think he was rehired almost as like a hired hand around the wall. So this is all just from memory. But he's back, kind of like David Gilmour brought him back, but not as a full-time, like he's not in the band picture. And the thing is with bands, I've come to realize more as the years have gone how important the legal membership to the corporation of the band is in terms of like royalty payments and just money going forward and decision making, and that a lot of bands are really wary or unwilling to bring anyone in as a full band member after fame has been achieved. I can kind of think of a few of the Deftones more recently, after Chi Cheng, had his accident and then passed away. They had Sergio, can't remember his second name, Sergio Vega, as the bass player. He replaced Chi Cheng. And he played on from like Diamond Eyes onwards. Diamond Eyes, Koi no Yokan, Gore, Genesis. There's one I'm forgetting there in the middle, I think. Anyway, he played on those, and he wrote some of the. He's got songwriting credits on some of those albums. And he wanted to be made a full member of the band. And basically, it sounds like the reason why he was eventually let go or booted out is because the band did not want to make him a full member. It kind of came to an impasse where they're like, well, no, you can stay on as a salaried kind of hired hand for touring and for recording, but we don't want to make you as a full member of the band business. And so he, don't know whether he left or they kicked him, but he's not in the band anymore. And there are other cases as well. So yeah, maybe that's why Rick Wright wasn't brought back in. But I know David Gilmour's kind of said a lot about Rick Wright and how he felt bad the way he was treated, and he's tried to kind of not rehabilitate, I don't think rehabilitate, but try to kind of show how important Rick was in Pink Floyd's sound. And his vocals, for a long time I didn't even know it was his vocals, like on Time, on the kind of higher vocal, every day is getting shorter, never that part, that's Rick Wright. I never actually picked that out, that was a third voice, because obviously Roger's voice and David's voice, and then you realize actually especially in the earlier stuff, and you can think, well, actually he sings more than I realized. Rick Wright's actually, and then obviously his keyboard work, and so David Gilmour seems to kind of like really try to emphasize that. Anyway, I'll talk about that more later. But anyway, you can see the booklet of this is in excellent condition. CD, I didn't look at the dark side CD, but this looks like it's fine. A Momentary Lapse of Reason. More Storm Thorgensen, or whatever his name is, photography here. Kind of like surrealist stuff. People sleeping on the beach on their bed. Apparently cocaine was, especially the touring, the tour for this, the world tour of this. It was quite everywhere, and they were all kind of partaking. And David Gilmour kind of regrets that. I read an interview with him recently saying, if he could talk to himself in that period, what would he say? What advice would he give? He would say, ease off the cocaine, or don't do the cocaine, because he regrets. I'm not exactly sure what aspect, like obviously maybe the health implications or whatever, but maybe he made some decisions at that time or something. Yeah, so happy to have this. Slowly filling in the gaps in my Pink Floyd CD collection, secondhand collection. Now, the way this kind of links up is just kind of by chance. I went to the library on Sunday with my son, as we often do, kind of a couple of times a month, get some books for him to read or us to read together. And usually I try to pick up something. And they used to have a really good selection of music. I guess music magazines barely exist anymore, do they? A lot of them have kind of gone out of business. My favorite one, Q magazine, the British magazine, that stopped during COVID. That was by far my favorite music magazine. I discovered so much music through it. But I guess maybe this one would be number 2, but maybe not. I often cover a lot of music in this that I'm not really interested in. Uncut has got a very prescribed kinds of bands that they cover, or artists they cover. Classic rock of a certain kind, and more modern music, but it's hard to even describe what the modern music is. Nothing rocky in the modern music. Anything past 1995, if they're going to cover it, it has to be much more alternative, acoustic, folky, avant-garde. They will cover earlier stuff, like for example in here there's an article about the Breeders, Kim Deal's band, post Bixie's band, and they were around the early mid-90s, but I guess they kind of tick the box that they're kind of indie-ish. But anyway, there's a good article in here about Beth Gibbons and her new Beth Gibbons is the singer from Portishead, her new solo album, which I actually listened to a bit, and it's quite nice. I've only listened through it to it once. But anyway, my point of bringing this up is that there's a good article in here about David Gilmour, interviews him, and he's talking about his, like I was saying, his most recent solo album, Luck and Strange. It's quite an insightful interview, and he talks about quite a few different things. He talks about Rick Wright. He talks about his family and how important it is to be around his family. And if you saw any of those things that he did during the COVID lockdown, the early part of that, he did kind of songs together with his family and this kind of not weird, that's not right. They call themselves the Von Trapp family, but the Von Trapps from The Sound of Music, this kind of musical family sitting there singing together. Quite cute. There it is there. That's one of the photos. I was watching a video of this the other day. That's his daughter Romany. She features on his most recent solo album. They do a cover of a song by, where are they? These guys, the Montgolfier brothers, called, what is it? Between Two Points or something like that. I can't find it. Something like that. But him and his daughter sing on that together. And I just saw recently a video of them performing "Wish You Were Here" live in some bar or something, some small little cafe. But yeah, he talks about how, and there's also, he talks about his wife, Polly. and you might see her name on here, is it Polly Sampson, because she has writing credits. She writes the lyrics for a lot of his music, his solo stuff and post. She wrote High Hopes on, geez, my memory. I don't know if I can, the Momentary, it's that. On the Division Bell. And I remember, I've known that for a long time because I read another interview, this would have been, I think, in Q magazine about 20 years ago, talking about that. And a lot of people kind of turn their nose, like I think Roger Waters has kind of said some snarky comment. Very Roger Waters, isn't it? Snarky comments about his wife writing the lyrics for the music. But I don't know. What's the problem? As long as they're not terrible. So he talks about that. There's the three of them. There's a little part here of Guy Pratt. I talked about him once. Guy Pratt has basically been his bassist post Roger Waters. From the Momentary Lapse tour onwards. He's featured on all the Pink Floyd stuff and all their tours, and I think most of David Gilmour's solo stuff. He married Rick Wright's daughter. I thought, for some reason, I thought it was David Gilmour's daughter, but it's Rick Wright's daughter. They're divorced now, but yeah, I guess maybe they met on tour or something like that, and they were married for a pretty long time, all in the family. That's the Charlie Andrew. That's the producer who I was talking about, who's done this most recent solo album, like classic 70s Floyd look there. There's a lot of pictures of him and Rick. It's like they're trying to like emphasize something. Here's his daughter in the studio, Romani. I'm not sure how you pronounce that name. Also, they talk a little bit about that last album they did with the Endless River. I actually quite like parts of that. I don't like all of it, but I like parts of it. He's since said that he regrets releasing it, that he was going to bullied into it by the record company. Because they had all this leftover stuff from the Division Bell sessions in '94, so this is 20 years previous, and they would think of how to use it, and so obviously he wasn't bullied. I don't think they can bully David Gilmour, but as in they, I guess, convinced him strongly, and it was released kind of as a like it says here, the presence of Rick Wright on Like Strangers, the latest posthumous appearance from the Floyd's talismanic keyboard player following Wright's untimely death, but Gilmour has continued to honor the closeness forged between the two bandmates during their many decades together. When Gilmour assumed stewardship of the Floyd, among his first tasks was to bring the absent Wright back to the fold. Continued work on a solo album. Anyway, one thing I've kind of, I guess, to tie this into a neat bow, kind of, they talk about the album On an Island, which was his solo album from 2006. And I remember when that was released, I was working in a restaurant at the time. And it got quite good reviews, but I never actually listened to it. But for the first time, after reading this article, and they referred to that song, Guy Pratt refers to it and says it was written by Polly and David about an evening they had with friends on a Greek island. It was Michael Kamen, the famous composer, and the Pink Floyd agent, and now they're both dead. And it was about kind of dead friends living on. But that's an amazing song. On an Island, the song On an Island from the album On an Island. The first three songs on that album, I can't remember the name. The first song's an instrumental. On an Island, then In Blue or In the Blue, something like that. Those first three songs are really have that Pink Floyd otherworldly feel to them. Also has David Crosby and Graham Nash singing backup vocals on an island and the chorus. But if you haven't heard that, because some other parts on sorry, some other songs on that album I could take or leave, but those first three songs are, especially On an Island, the title track, it's kind of stayed in my brain all week. It's, yeah, there's something very Pink Floyd about it. Like, it doesn't sound like well, it does sound like, it's got the singer and the guitarist from Pink Floyd, so of course it's going to have some of that, but it has also that atmosphere, or that kind of feeling. So I recommend those first three songs from that album. Really quite beautiful. Anyway, that has been a long video, but it all kind of connected just by chance that I read this article at the same time as I got these 2 secondhand CDs. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.